Hello everyone, so today I'm going to be talking about someone called Cardinal Keith O'Brien, who wrote an article that was published about a week and a half ago by the Telegraph that was entitled "We Cannot Afford to Indulge This Madness," with the subheading of "Cardinal Keith O'Brien, Britain's most senior Catholic, sets out his opposition to the government's plans to legalise gay marriage." Now this article has been criticised by many people for the various fun things the Cardinal says in it, but I'm not going to talk about any one particular part of the article because although there are some sections that do stand out as textbook examples of bigotry and insult, there is quite simply something repulsive and disgusting in almost every paragraph. So I'm going to take you through it paragraph by paragraph to show you exactly why pretty much everything he says in the article is not only inaccurate and incorrect, but also morally repugnant. So, let us begin. The government is this month launching a consultation on same-sex marriage, asking the public whether it should be introduced in England and Wales. I hope many respond and consider signing the petition in support of traditional marriage, organised by a new organisation, the Coalition for Marriage. And for what it's worth, I encourage all of you to sign the petition supporting equal marriage at www.c4em.org.uk, link in the description. On the surface, the question of same-sex marriage may seem to be an innocuous one. Yes, that's because it is. Civil partnerships have been in place for several years now, allowing same-sex couples to register their relationship and enjoy a variety of legal protections. When these arrangements were introduced, supporters were at pains to point out that they didn't want marriage, accepting that marriage had only ever meant the legal union of a man and a woman. Really? Isn't it always the case that civil partnerships and other equivalent unions are only ever used as a stepping stone to full marriage equality? Did you really think that gay people and their supporters in this country were just going to stop and be satisfied with separate but equal? At the very least, equal rights campaigners weren't demanding gay marriage then. They just urgently wanted to guarantee that gay people would be, for example, afforded the dignity of full hospital visitation rights. You know, little things like that. And as it happens, marriage has not only ever meant the legal union of a man and a woman, as I will explain a little later. Moving on. Those of us who are not in favour of civil partnership, believing that such relationships are harmful to the physical, mental and spiritual well-being of those involved, warned that in time marriage would be demanded too. We were accused of scaremongering then, yet exactly such demands are upon us now. Okay, you can say whatever you want about spiritual well-being, but saying that gay people being in relationships harms not only their mental well-being but their physical well-being, with literally zero evidence as to why, is despicable. How dare you? Oh, that's right, you're a high-ranking member of the Catholic Church. And what demands are upon you? As it happens, this actually has nothing to do with you. No one is forcing you to marry a man, no matter how funny that would be. Since all the legal rights of marriage are already available to homosexual couples, it is clear that this proposal is not about rights, but rather is an attempt to redefine marriage for the whole of society at the behest of a small minority of activists. Wait, you can't act as if equal rights campaigners are being unreasonable because they're asking for changes above and beyond legal rights when you've already admitted that you were not in favour of civil partnerships in the first place. So if it were up to you, gay people wouldn't have these rights anyway. That said, as it happens, the ability to call your loved one your husband or wife is absolutely a right. Being able to be just married is absolutely a right. And yes, the definition of civil marriage is being expanded to make it available to more people. How exactly does that affect straight marriages? And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. And not that it matters, but supporters of gay rights in this country number in the tens of millions. That's hardly a small minority of activists. Redefining marriage will have huge implications for what is taught in our schools and for wider society. It will redefine society since the institution of marriage is one of the fundamental building blocks of society. The repercussions of enacting same-sex marriage into law will be immense. Canada, Sweden, Norway. What exactly are the repercussions that occurred in these countries? But can we simply redefine terms at a whim? Can a word whose meaning has been clearly understood in every society throughout history suddenly be changed to mean something else? First of all, yes. Second of all, this is a disingenuous lie. Marriage has existed in various forms throughout human history. It has never been just one thing. It has been heterosexual, homosexual, monogamous, polygamous. The legal status and the nature of marital rights has varied wildly, although often favouring men. And the motivations for marrying have been, and in many cases still are, multifaceted. Motivations for marrying could be legal, social, libidinal, economic, political, religious, spiritual. Some people even married out of love. But even if we are to believe your erroneous understanding of history. What you're essentially saying there, Cardinal, is that the definition of marriage shouldn't be changed because it's never been changed before. Try again, Cardinal. If same-sex marriage is enacted into law, what will happen to the teacher who wants to tell pupils that marriage can only mean, and has only ever meant, the union of a man and a woman? Will that teacher's right to hold and teach this view be respected, or will it be removed? Will both teacher and pupil simply be the next victims of the tyranny of tolerance, heretics whose dissent from state-imposed orthodoxy must be crushed at all costs? Once again, supporters of gay rights are being asked to be tolerant of intolerance. Tell me, what would you make of a situation wherein a teacher believed it wrong to marry outside of one's own race, and that this belief was religiously motivated, as has been the case before? Should we be tolerant of an educator's right to teach this belief? In Article 16 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, marriage is defined as a relationship between men and women. But when our politicians suggest jettisoning the established understanding of marriage and subverting its meaning, they aren't derided. That is not what Article 16 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says. It says, men and women of full age without any limitation due to race, nationality or religion have the right to marry and to found a family. They are entitled to equal rights as to marriage, during marriage and at its dissolution. Nothing in that passage limits marriage to the union of one man and one woman. And if it did, that would be reason enough to reject it. Instead, their attempt to redefine reality is given a polite hearing. Their madness is indulged. Their proposal represents a grotesque subversion of a universally accepted human right. You know what I think is madness? I think it's madness that a man who has restricted himself to never enter into a romantic relationship with anyone believes himself to have the right to dictate the morality of relationships to other people. As an institution, marriage long predates the existence of any state or government. It was not created by governments and should not be changed by them. As it happens, marriage actually has been changed by governments, and in many cases, it was absolutely necessary and absolutely preferable that it was. For instance, the Marriage Act of 1836, passed by this country's government, created civil marriage in this country for the sake of the religious liberty of non-Anglican Christians. As for decades up until that point, the only legally recognised marriages were those that were performed in the Anglican Church. Civil marriage was created at that point by the government for the sake of the rights of Christian minorities. It gave people the right to marry as they personally saw fit, and it did this by changing the legal definition of marriage. Surely you would support a change like this. That is, unless you want to go back a couple of hundred years to when marriage in this country was legally required to be performed in the Anglican Church, when other religious minorities, including Catholics such as yourself, weren't able to marry as they wished. Would you have wanted these stringent controls to have remained law? Or would you have wanted the definition of marriage to change? No, you're obviously completely fine with marriage changing if it fits your personal preferences. It only becomes a problem for you when it doesn't. I mean, even if we only look at this country, the definition of marriage has changed again and again and again, often for good reason. The Marriage Act of 1836, the Marriage Act of 1949, the Marriage Act of 1994. These all changed how marriage could be carried out by changing its legal definition. This is why your opposition to changing the supposedly immutable definition of marriage is really nothing more than a distraction. The core of your opposition to gay marriage is the fact that you have a problem with gay relationships. That's it. Now that's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but you have your right to freedom of conscience and you have your right to think what you want to think. But that is where your involvement in other people's marriages ends. Equal rights supporters are campaigning for equal civil marriage. They are not campaigning for a right to force certain religious groups to marry them. They want civil marriage, civil meaning of or pertaining to citizens, some of which happen to be gay. As Lynn Featherstone said, marriage belongs to the people, and the government should be representative of the people. It is for this reason that I not only support the government's intentions to treat gay people fairly, I expect it to. That's its job. So you see, the government did create marriage in this country and has changed its definition several times. It just so happens that up until now, it hasn't changed its definition to substantially fall out of alignment with how you feel it should exist. Now that it is, religious leaders such as yourself are all of a sudden up in arms about it, declaring that the ancient institution, which has apparently been constant and completely unchanging for millennia, is being attacked. That is such a parochial and self-absorbed perspective. You don't own marriage. It belongs to all of us. Instead, recognizing the innumerable benefits which marriage brings to society, they should act to protect and uphold marriage, not attack or dismantle it. Absolutely none of that contradicts the introduction of gay marriage. This is a point of view that would have been endorsed and accepted only a few years ago. Yet today, advancing a traditional understanding of marriage risks one being labelled an intolerant bigot. Yes, that is because you are. There is no doubt that as a society, we have become blasé about the importance of marriage as a stabilising influence, and less inclined to prize it as a worthwhile institution. All the more reason to increase the number of people who are legally able to get married. If anything, the people who understand exactly how important marriage can be are those who have never had a chance to take it for granted. It has been damaged and undermined over the course of a generation, yet marriage has always existed in order to bring men and women together, so that children born of these unions will have a mother and a father. Of course! That's why every married heterosexual couple always has kids, right? And therefore, that's why all the rights given to married heterosexual couples are all there for the benefit of children. Right? This brings us to one perspective which seems to be completely lost or ignored. The point of view of the child. Oh, here we go. All children deserve to begin life with a mother and father. The evidence in favour of the stability and well-being which this provides is overwhelming and unequivocal. It cannot be provided by a same-sex couple, however well-intentioned they may be. Oh, please, won't somebody think of the children? Here's the facts. Children don't specifically need a mother, and they don't specifically need a father. All children need are parents that love them and care for them. The gender of the parents is irrelevant, and I think you'll find that all the reputable academic studies into the ability of gay people to raise children show that gay couples are just as effective at raising happy and well-adjusted children as straight couples. It is the quality of the parent that matters, not the gender. Of course, unlike my holier-than-thou opponent, will actually show some sources for this fact. Links in the description. Same-sex marriage would eliminate entirely in law the basic idea of a mother and a father for every child. It would create a society which deliberately chooses to deprive a child of either a mother or a father. Now that is highly disingenuous phrasing. That almost implies that legalizing gay marriage will somehow take mothers and fathers away from children already being raised by straight couples. Moving on. Other dangers exist. If marriage can be redefined so that it no longer means a man and a woman but two men or two women, why stop there? Why not allow 3 men or a woman and 2 men to constitute a marriage if they pledge their fidelity to one another? If marriage is simply about adults who love each other, on what basis can 3 adults who love each other be prevented from marrying? Okay, polygamous marriage is a completely different issue, and opinions on whether it should be legalized or not vary wildly between all kinds of people, including straight people and gay people. It is entirely independent of the argument surrounding gay marriage. You seem to think that the two are linked, that the legalization of gay marriage has some inherent quality that will aid the legalization of polygamous marriage. If you look at history, and I mean actual history, not your absurd understanding of it, you will find many examples of polygamous marriage existing while gay marriage was still very much illegal. In fact, this arrangement is currently the case in dozens of countries around the world. There is no reason to suggest that the introduction of gay marriage will definitely lead to the introduction of polygamous marriage. And for those of you who don't know, suggesting that one thing will definitely lead to another without providing any evidence as to why is called the slippery slope fallacy. As a prominent religious leader in society, the Cardinal should know better. He doesn't, but he should. In November 2003, after a court decision in Massachusetts to legalize gay marriage, school libraries were required to stock same-sex literature. Primary school children were given homosexual fairy stories such as King and King. Some high school students were given an explicit manual of homosexual advocacy entitled The Little Black Book, Queer in the 21st Century. Education suddenly had to comply with what was now deemed normal. And your point is? The morality of what Massachusetts did and didn't do is completely irrelevant. Again though, it would be interesting to hear what the Cardinal would have to say if books promoting, for instance, the acceptance of interracial relationships or the history of black people in the UK were given to children. Would this be part of the black agenda? A blatant attempt by non-whites to force their opinions on our poor, defenseless little white children? I wonder. And by the way, homosexuality is normal. Ask any reputable psychological organisation and they will give you the same answer. Disingenuously, the government has suggested that same-sex marriage wouldn't be compulsory and churches could choose to opt out. This is staggeringly arrogant. No government has the moral authority to dismantle the universally understood meaning of marriage. We've been over this, Keith. Imagine for a moment that the government had decided to legalise slavery, but assured us that no one would be forced to keep a slave. Okay, at the heart of it, this analogy relies on the beginning premise that both slavery and civil marriage between 2 people of the same sex are wrong. Not necessarily equally wrong, but wrong nonetheless. Therefore, allowing either is wrong, regardless of whether participation is compulsory or not. Of course, where this analogy fails is at the very first premise, as it already assumes that gay marriage is indeed wrong. You have to prove that gay marriage is wrong for that entire analogy to work. As has been seen, the Cardinal has so far done a phenomenally awful job of proving why gay marriage is wrong. chiefly because it isn't. And of course the direct comparison to slavery is just gravy. The Cardinal could have chosen anything else to compare gay marriage to, and he chose the willful removal of another person's rights to the effect that they are actually owned by another person. Not only is gay marriage entirely outside of the category of wrong in which slavery sits, it is in many ways oppositional to slavery, as instead of removing rights from non-consenting individuals, it confers rights upon individuals who are consenting. One, by definition, bestows rights, the other, by definition, takes them away. This is a flagrantly insensitive and egregious comparison. I would say that the Cardinal should be ashamed of himself, but he clearly lacks that capacity to the point of sociopathy. Should such worthless assurances calm our fury? Would they justify dismantling a universal human right, or would they simply amount to weasel words masking a great wrong? Again, Cardinal O'Brien speaks authoritatively about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights while having a pervasively bad understanding of it. Fundamentally, Article 16 of the Declaration does not exclude gay marriage. Nevertheless, his conceptualization of heterosexual marriage as a right in and of itself is interesting, laughably foolish and dumb, but interesting. Because what this portrayal of heterosexual marriage does is suggest that gay marriage and straight marriage are mutually exclusive. Neither can exist at the same time without infringing upon the right to heterosexual marriage. That is, legalizing gay marriage would amount to the infringement of the rights of others, or forcing gay marriage onto society. It's very similar to when people say that legalizing gay marriage would be redefining marriage for everyone. Funnily enough, this understanding of marriage can be transferred to other situations quite easily, at which point its flaws become incredibly obvious. For instance, the Marriage Act of 1994 removed the restriction that all marriages have to take place in churches, registry offices, or other specially approved places, allowing people to potentially get married in places like forests or shops. Now, as a religious man, and specifically a Catholic, I suspect that Cardinal O'Brien believes that the proper location for marriages to be held is in the Catholic Church before God. That said, I imagine that the Cardinal also respects the rights of others to marry in potentially unorthodox locations. He may not think that marrying in, for instance, a shop is the best place to marry, but he respects that people have the right to do what they want, and potentially, in his eyes, make foolish or unwise decisions. Nonetheless, the Marriage Act of 1994 changed the definition of marriage for everyone in exactly the same way that gay marriage would. It did, in a sense, change the definition of marriage, but people could still get married in a church in the way that they always could, and the definition was not changed in a way that removed anyone else's rights. People can still marry in churches if they wish, and they are not restricted to only marrying in forests. By exactly the same reasoning, the legalization of gay marriage would change its definition, but not in a way that stopped people from marrying in the way that they always could, or restricted them to getting married in another way. Straight marriage would still be legal, and no one would be forced to marry someone of the same sex. Therefore, the reasoning that allows someone to say that heterosexual marriage is a right in and of itself, and that legalizing gay marriage would be forcing a redefinition of marriage on everybody, is exactly the same reasoning that could be used to say that marrying in a church is a right in and of itself, and allowing people to marry in other places would be an infringement of that right, and tantamount to forcing that redefinition on everyone. Which is, of course, utterly ridiculous. Legalizing gay marriage does not infringe on anyone else's rights. It took me a while to explain all of that with the precision and detail that I felt necessary, but I hope now you can all understand that the following adage rings true. If you don't like gay marriage, don't marry someone of the same sex. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is crystal clear. Marriage is a right which applies to men and women. The family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state. Again, none of that contradicts the legalization of gay civil marriage. This universal truth is so evident that it shouldn't need to be repeated. If the government attempts to demolish a universally recognised human right, they will have forfeited the trust which society has placed in them, so apparently society doesn't have gay people in it. Okay. And their intolerance will shame the United Kingdom in the eyes of the world. Yeah, like Canada. What an international pariah. Ugh, okay, so that's the entire article. Every limp argument disproven and every impotent threat refuted. And with such ease. I like to end this with something that I always say at the end of videos like this, and some of you may be a little bit tired of me saying this and sick of hearing it, but I not only think that it's true, but that it's important. Cardinal Keith O'Brien and those like him stand like King Canute on the shore, commanding the waves not to sweep forward and drench their feet. Equality for gay people is inevitable. It will not stop charging forward, and those who oppose it condemn themselves to languishing forever on the wrong side of history. It is up to you, Cardinal. It's up to you. See you later.